Now that we've seen the layers panel and we know kind of where everything is, let's use that panel to start creating some new layers inside of this document. So I'm going to go over here to my panels and I'll open up the layers panel like so, and I'll drag it out into my window. And in the layers panel, what I want to do is I want to create some layers inside of this. So the first thing I want to do is create 2 layers on top of it. So let's create one layer by clicking create new layer and another layer by clicking it again. So now I have layer 1, layer 2, and layer 3. Now, depending on how many layers you've been creating or how many layers used to be in the file you're working with, it may or may not say 1, 2, and 3 in sequence like that. I've had documents open where I've created, let's say, 37 layers, and so the next one I create is 38, but then I delete some, and then the next one's 40. It just gets really out of whack sometimes. But you have the ability to rename these layers anytime you want. So if I were to double-click right here where it says Layer 1, when I double-click there, it gives me an inline text window that I can then plug a name for the layer in. So in this case, I'm going to name this Bone. Layer 2, double click. This one I'm going to name this Text. And layer 3, we're going to double click and name this Bulldog. Now that we have all of these new layers created, anytime we want to make a change to those layers, it's actually very easy. We can go right here and choose Options for, and it'll say Bulldog in quotes. That's the name of the layer you currently have selected. So if I open up the options panel for that, I have the ability to change the name, change the layer color, make that layer a template, lock it, dim the images on that layer to say 50%. I can also turn on and off the show, the preview, and whether or not it's printed. Anytime you make a change to anything in this dialog box, you want to go ahead and hit OK. But first off, let's talk about why we might want to change any of these options. So for instance, why might we want to change the green color? Well, the green color is going to be the color of the objects that you select on that layer. So basically, let's hit OK here. And let me make a selection down here on this blue layer so you can see exactly what happens. If I select something out of my artboard, notice how the outlines on this object are all blue? That's because the layer color is blue. If I were to go to the layer options for bone, and change the color to something like yellow and hit OK, then the outline becomes yellow. You can see how this might be problematic if I were working with something that had a yellow color in it, or maybe the background of the object was yellow. So you want to pick colors for your layers that make sense and also that really create good amounts of contrast between those images and the background images around them. So in this case, yellow, not a good choice for the bone layer. So let's double click. Let's change this to something more, let's try something like the teal. That works. Hit OK. And now we have a decent color around there that creates enough contrast where we can see the outlines and it's not distracting and it doesn't really clash with any of the other pieces. Now, if we wanted to change the colors of any of these other ones, maybe they might be too close to this, like for instance, teal and this green might be a little too close. We can double click to the right and change the color again. So in this case, let's make this one something like violet and hit OK. So now we've got teal, red, and violet. Now let's go back and take one more look at that little panel and let's discuss some of these other options. So why might I want to turn on the template checkbox? That's because that's something that is going to allow me to use this layer as a template going forward. So when I do that, if I check that, you'll also notice that the dim images to 50% option is automatically checked. Basically, when you are bringing in raster graphics into Illustrator for tracing purposes, it's a really good idea to place those objects on their own layer. So let's say you sketch something out with a piece of paper and a pencil, and you scan that into your computer, you bring it into Illustrator, and you place it into a new document. Enabling the template function on that layer is going to automatically dim that so you can still see it, but you can easily trace over it to convert it into vector artwork. That's the main use that I have for this template layer. So usually I don't use this unless I'm actually trying to convert something from a pencil sketch into live vector art. You can turn it off by clicking the check mark, and this automatically disables as well. The lock mechanism is the same as we saw in the layers panel earlier, and the rest of these I usually just leave on unless we are not going to print a certain layer when this file goes to print. So for instance, if I had a layer specifically for instructions to someone, or we were making notes while we were collaborating, things like that, then maybe I don't want to print that layer. Again, these are totally going to be project specific and not anything that you would do every single time. Once you're finished making changes, of course, hit OK, and there you go. So hopefully now we have a better understanding of how to create layers and also how to edit them here inside of the Layers panel. Now let's talk about how to start moving content from one layer to another. Now that we've seen the Layers panel and we know kind of where everything is, let's use that panel to start creating some new layers inside of this document. So I'm going to go over here to my panels and I'll open up the Layers panel like so, and I'll drag it out into my window. And in the Layers panel, what I want to do is I want to create some layers inside of this. So the first thing I want to